government has a chilling effect. But I'll tell you, like, it's sort of that we have very few, as you know, we have very few directors in the Burlington Police, and I strive to change that every day. But I was asked by Leahy's people, do you have a policy that says that every time a cop communicates with a federal official, they have to tell their supervisor? The answer is no, we've never had a policy like that. However, we do want to know when, if an everyday patrol officer decides he's going to call the feds, I want my bosses to know about that. And it's come to a head with the immigration enforcement issue because the feds have forced it to come ahead, because they forced 1373 to the forefront. They've forced us to have to make sure officers in the city understands it. And then building around that understanding is a policy. That policy says that if an officer communicates of his own volition with the federal government, that they have to let a supervisor know. So we'll see how this goes. Does everyone understand where we're at? I mean, I know.
I mean, if it was a different topic, like, you know, maybe like, you know, drug related or something, it's a different story.
No, but if one of my cops is like, I'm going to call if one of my cops on patrol is like, I'm calling the FBI because I want to let them know something. Like, we want to know that they're doing that.
And they probably would on that topic tell you, because it all makes sense.
Tell us on all topics, right? We're just making it clear. If I had to write a policy agency-wide tomorrow, is that you would line officers would let supervisors know at all times that they communicate with the feds. Just a simple management chain of command. Please.
Yeah, Chief. At one time, I remember you saying that the state law mandated that all municipalities conform to the state requirement.
That's right. The essential elements of the state policy.
So so the state now is off the hook, so to speak.
Yeah.
And they're looking at us. Do we have the freedom to be that different from the state?
No, you want like a rhyme or reason, but like that there's a reason behind why they. I mean, I'm not directing this to you. Like, are you shocked to know that Trump is like kind of arbitrary in how he does
I'm
this?
not shocked at all. I'm not shocked at all. But
it doesn't make sense.
I'm just wondering, where does it place us in terms of our options, if you will? I mean, do we have options? Are we at the mercy now of what the state has done? Do we have an option to reaffirm what we've done, which apparently the state now has moved from? Do we have that option?
My opinion is we should be guided by not only our deliberation here, but the city attorney, right? Because ultimately, this is a city. It's a liability for the city. It's a liability for the police department. We have insurance. We have attorneys, and I know that when the new policy comes out, I'm sure that the city attorney will look at the new policy, the old one, make an assessment of liability, and we can consider it. But I mean, the reason why we've come to the attention of the feds is because the mayor's been very vociferous about this. I mean, there are very few cities in Vermont. There are very few cities with the profile. No city with the profile of Burlington, and no city with the outsized voice of Burlington. So, and the irony is that we probably do we have little or no intersection with immigrants at all. I mean, it's unfortunate maybe they're afraid to be out in public these days, but even before, like, this has never really been an issue for us. This is a lot of politics, and I honestly also feel the DOJ is sending out these letters to us, but it's really a message to their strongest supporters. Like, they're using the correspondence with us not to, like, chip away at us. Like, Burlington's not going to be, oh my God, you're right, the letter scared me, I'm changing my mind, and all my cops have to do immigration enforcement. It's signaling to their supporters that they're going to try to, like, you know, smack a few cities around that don't follow the immigration line. That's the way I see it. I mean, have we had any, just to reiterate, like we have had no immigration-related incidents at all among our police since this started.
Correct. So what, is there a protocol we should expect once this sort of plays itself out? Is this going to circle back to us to review, or just if you know what that might look like?
No, I mean, I doubt that the city will, my opinion anyways at this point, that the city is not inclined to take federal guidance on the state of our policy. So the only way I see us having to consider something is if the city attorney compares the state's new policy with our policy and sees a need or an opportunity or a cause to discuss changes or a new direction. But bear in mind, the policy we're living with now, like, we helped write it, and then the city council approved it, and the city attorney reviewed it, right? So not in that order, but yeah.
Okay.
It's just, I mean, here we are. All right. Implicit bias training next week. Are any of you guys going? Should be good.
Yeah.
Dr. Marks is coming on Monday and Tuesday to train our officers, then Wednesday for the community session, then the next Monday and Tuesday to train the rest of our officers. So it's actually, I think, 240 seats for police. Does that sound right? 60 per session roughly? More maybe? Completely full, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we have 150 plus or minus employees here, 144. They're all scheduled for the training. Then an additional, basically 100. Is that right? Yeah, more or less 90 people coming from out. So like, the rest of the cops in Vermont practically. But there would be an additional 90 officers and state's attorneys and sheriff's deputies coming from all over the state. So it should be excellent training. I'm excited about it. I think there's an initial discomfort about implicit bias when we talk with not just cops but Americans in general being told, that there's bias and there's maybe latent racism in the work we do, and people don't want to hear that. But I think that this instructor, if anybody can overcome that through like the gift of good instruction, I think it's Dr. Marks. So
There's a test that Harvard has, a bias test.
right, implicit
And,
bias.
and I took it and failed. And it really, I
it's,
did.
it's not failing.
Well, that's what
I
we
don't
say.
mean.
And Judge Grierson
Yeah.
told me he did too. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to get other people on that panel to admit that they did, but
Yeah.
it's interesting. I mean, and when you take the test, I remember you describing it. It's
Yeah.
really interesting. The test itself is interesting.
I think even if, there's a lot of people who say that the test is valid, and some people, fair-minded people, not just like.
When I
ooh.
failed, I said, what did they?
Right, what do they know about this test? Look at me.
They're
If
just-
nothing else, the test is thought-provoking, right?
Yeah.
Because it just
Yeah.
gets you to think about associations. So that's happening. We just skip. I mean, next month, or maybe in the interim, we can talk about what we thought of the test. What we thought of the training. We just hired 4 more officers. You'll get to meet them shortly when they get. I mean, if nothing else, when they graduate from the police academy, they'll be coming to, which will be in weeks from now, 16 weeks or more. They'll be coming to a police commission meeting, so you'll get to see them.
Will they be part of that training too?
That's a good question. Why not?
Because they'll be at the academy.
Because they'll be starting next week already. Wow, they're done. Okay, because they'll be at the police academy. Thank you. Time flies. They're done with pre-basic. All right, so yeah. Not a conspiracy. They just happen to be at the academy. Opioids. A few things. I don't know if you follow the news. We're starting. You want to talk about this, Sean? I'm starting an overdose response team with the fire department and our opioid policy coordinator. It's got a bit of coverage in the news. I think it's something that just tries to expose as many people to the possibility of treatment in the wake of an overdose as possible by doing some follow-up.
Should I-
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so it's a pretty simple model that's been found to be effective in other places, right? Like Ohio, New Hampshire, they do some of this work, where it'll be Chief Locke from the fire department, Jackie Corbley, and myself will go out to the residences of those that have experienced an overdose within hopefully like a 24-hour window, if not 48-hour window. And again, it's just to intersect this person with Jackie and talk about resources and path toward treatment. It has no element of criminal investigation. And in fact, we feel strongly, I spoke with Sarah George about this, that actually immunity from liability, that law which protects those that summon resources, emergency services to the scene of an overdose, and those that experience overdose from drug crime arrest, we feel that it attaches to this effort as well. We're going to run this program starting February 1st, and Jackie did some numbers, and it looks like we may have to go out maybe 2 to 7 times. Sometimes it's a little tough because not all the time is it a person from Burlington that overdoses here. And oftentimes people that are experiencing overdoses are transient as it relates to residents or maybe on the run, that kind of thing. So we'll have to see, like the basic metric will be how many people we can actually connect with, and then from that number will be how many of those folks actually are receptive to talking with Jackie, and then from that populace, how many of them actually make any affirmative effort to enter treatment. So we're hopeful in that regard, but again, knowing that there's no perfect formula as to when a person's ready to enter treatment or receive assistance with substance abuse. You know, there's some unknown there, but it does seem highly likely that after the wake-up call of an overdose that they might be receptive to some help.
So Chief, will you show up in the uniform?
Yeah, so that's generally I'm appareled as such, and
Even at home.
so and I also, you know, we do these type of escorts for a variety of social service providers, you know, whether it's DCF or any number of things. You know, we do them on almost a daily basis at a Uniform Services. So generally, yeah, I would go like this, and because that's really my only role would be to, you know, knock on the door, make sure that no one on the other side of the door poses harm to the social service provider, and then just have them hang out and talk about, you know, what's available for them. And Chief Locke's role obviously is he's an EMT, given his trade in the fire service. So if the person needed you know, medical treatment in a very acute sense, or we need to summon an ambulance, we have a direct liaison to the fire department as part of the team.
And I think it's important, I'm sorry, you're gonna say
No,
something.
they're going to be busy. They're
Yeah.
going to be extremely busy.
Yeah, it's when we look at the overdose numbers, reported overdoses, so like, you know, we'll only go to the ones that are actually reported to the police. And like last July, for an example, we had none. In October or November of this year, I think we had 17. So with very little predictability, because there's no, you know, seasonality, there's no social element to opioid use. We'll just have to see what it is. And then I was asked a question today by one of the media outlets, like, you know, so what are you going to do? Compile 6 months of data and then evaluate? And I said, no. What we'll likely do is evaluate its effectiveness in the weeks leading up to the 6 month, and hopefully, you know, there is an impact there, and we'll know, you know, how to continue and how we need to better resource it, and maybe even some nuances about, you know, how the officials are attired and that kind of thing. You know, lessons learned in that regard.
Yeah, so the Good Samaritan law that prevails when, and we're missing most overdoses because they're not reported to the police. They're self-reversed with Narcan, which is, you know, fortunate, or unfortunately someone dies. But when they do call us, the Good Samaritan laws prevail. We don't take criminal action on the person who overdosed or the people at the scene. And going back the next day, we're going to self-apply those very same Good Samaritan laws. And, you know, there are some people, I mean, the ACLU is like, this is just going to scare people. Why aren't mental health and substance abuse professionals doing this? So great question. Why did we have to think of it? But, like, I do bristle that people are irritated at us for doing the thing that seems obvious that people should have been doing all along. And doing it, like, in a self-motivated way, and then by applying the Good Samaritan laws, it's like no good deed goes unpunished. And I understand your concern about the uniforms. I think that what we're trying to do is also, in a lot of the things we do, change the view that people at the lowest level, the everyday person struggling with addiction, has of the police. Like, we want them to know that, you know, the police care enough to come to your door. They're not looking to arrest you. If you come to the police station a few days later, or call up Jackie and Jackie says, come in, you can come here, and we're not going to arrest you. And it's not just that there are these special police that dress differently and act differently. You know, it's if you're robbing a bank, like, we're going to come for you. Or if you're breaking into people's houses. If you're committing retail theft, we may arrest you, but then we may want to get you into treatment and divert you. If you're just overdosing, we want to get you help. And I think that there's an opportunity for our response to this, and the profession, I mean, has evolved. And then there's an opportunity for people's understanding of the police role to evolve.
And it's a small enough town where that can happen.
Yeah.
And it's important for the public to hear, and you and I can talk about this because it's about to be February. We could maybe do something at the library. I mean, it's really important for people to understand that this is a new response to a problem everybody's trying to figure out.
Right. We try to
I think
do
people will hear that.
the best we can.
Yeah.
And, you know, the sort of the criticism, to reiterate, of why is the Howard Center doing this? Like, great question. I don't know what to tell you. But we're going to try to do the best we can. So
this is for all individuals. What's the trigger? Is it coming from law enforcement?
If-
interactions?
No, yeah, right, it comes from so right now, as it is, every other week, we have a running substat, we call it, which you're invited to come to if you want to see how it works just during the day. But it's a list of the, I guess, 15 to 20 most at-risk cases in the county. That's fueled by overdoses, fueled by law enforcement contacts, fueled by referrals, fueled by the opioid policy coordinator listening to what's going on out there, fueled by people's parents begging for help. And so we look at points to intervene there, like pre-arrest, post-arrest, proactive outreach. But when you look at and I'm kind of bleeding into the next topic, because we've been really doing another round of outreach across the country with professionals from public health on the opioid crisis. There are several points at which people can be inducted into treatment, and you really have to exploit all of those points. So one is that they show up at the ER with an overdose. And right now, the ER is really working on it, but at present, until they change it, they are working to change it finally, nothing happens. The overdose gets reversed and they get sent home with some Narcan. But that would be a great way to give them some buprenorphine and try to give them an appointment with an addiction psychiatrist. When someone is in prison, that is the most. I was talking to the number 2 guy at the, formerly at the FDA. He's an associate dean at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, and if the election had gone differently, he'd be the head of the FDA right now. And he says that if you want to make the biggest impact right now today in the opioid crisis, it would be treating opioid addicted prisoners. So there's that opportunity, which we're getting better at, but we're really not exploiting because we don't induct new prisoners into treatment in Vermont yet. Another opportunity is if people come to the needle exchange, there should be a way to, for example, prescribe buprenorphine and refer them to treatment without waiting directly from there. And then lastly, when someone overdoses and they have a moment where they reckon with it, the very next day they show up at their door and say, listen, I don't know what you're ready for, but you came within a hair's width of death last night. I know you weren't clear-headed then, but we want to try to get you help now and we're still here. That's another way. I can't control what the prisons do. I can't control what the hospital does. I can't control what the needle exchange does. But the 17 to 20 to 5 overdoses that we respond to a month,
Right.
we can follow up on them.
So those would be 911 calls, or if you find someone, but it's not gonna be the hospital, it's not gonna be,
That's right.
right,
That's
okay.
right. So police responses.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of missed opportunities. And so we're continuing, this kind of bleeds in, again, to the next topic. We've recently, opened some bridges with the Bloomberg Philanthropies, where they're opening a $100 million initiative on the opioid crisis in particular, where they're looking for innovative strategies. And then Bloomberg also bankrolls the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. I think he's got a $300 million endowment there. So they're separate but closely connected. They're opening a front they're on their opioid strategy, and they actually sought us out. They said, we've heard that among small cities, Burlington is doing a lot of really innovative work between community stat and substat, hiring an opioid policy coordinator. It hasn't saved as many lives as we'd like, but I think we really have a good grasp of the problem on our scale and what seems to work and doesn't work and what it would take to work better. So they've been inviting us to this stuff. I've been going. It's been very, very, very informative to hear really very few cops. I mean, it's a handful of law enforcement and police, but the former Surgeon General and Obama is taking part in this initiative. The number 2 guy at the FDA, the whole Johns Hopkins addiction apparatus, and it's really helping us gain some clarity, I think, in the best way forward here. And we could talk about that more, maybe. I mean, if you want later or some other time, but we really need to, I think, expand at the state level access to low barrier access to things like buprenorphine, and that's a whole other. It's a very I'm really excited by it. It's sort of a boring clinical conversation. But we need to get these medicines out there quickly to people and stop stigmatizing people who take medication like methadone and buprenorphine for treatment. So, I don't know. Again, I'd be happy to follow up. I will go down that rabbit hole in a second. But you have to lure me in there.
So if we want to attend one of these meetings, would you recommend community stat first before substat, or does it not?
I think it'd be interesting to attend community stat first and then substat, just because community stat really is a broad meeting with a lot of different actors, and substat is just 2 hours of people, and you'd understand the people better having gone to the bigger meeting. But it's not like it's like if you don't turn the key in just the right direction and
Right,
rock
right.
crushes you. I mean, you could go to either one.
And just check in with someone here before.
Yeah. Oh, please. No, you're more than. I mean, Laura can send out times and dates, and I think you'd find it illuminating. So all I have here by way of an update. If anyone has any specific questions, I'd be happy to update you on them. Okay.
Oh, yeah, so we already did the video recording thing. So, number 5 on our agenda is a review of any incoming correspondence. None? Oh, yeah.
Yes, I did send them out.
Oh, yeah, the commendation letters?
Yes,
good.
yes. So there were several that I sent out with the minutes and agenda. You want me to just read through them?
Sure.
I haven't checked them out in a while. So one, Sergeant Nash attended, and DC Burke went to the ALV and worked with a young men's group on internet safety, and it was a success. Francis from the ALV wrote to say, on behalf of the ALV, I'd like to thank you for coming to the youth meeting. Individuals like you are truly valuable to our community. I hope to continue working with you in the near future. They sent along some pictures and said we appreciate your support, and we'd love any ideas that can benefit youth in our community. So it was a good hour and a half presentation discussion with a pretty good group, 20 kids or so. I don't know if you want to-
Yeah, no, it was pretty meaningful. Like, you know, the topic that Sergeant Nash covered is valuable, internet safety, you know, particularly around sexting and those types of issues. But this group that meets, it's their young men's group, so, you know, teens to early 20s. And we had a really good open discussion about, you know, our relationship in the community, challenges that, you know, we see, barriers to trust, and, you know, our willingness and strong desire to have relationships with them and to work through any differences that may come up in a productive way by using the leadership there at AALB. You know, so just again, it was good to actually meet people face to face, exchange names, and just have a good conversation about, you know, why sometimes they're apprehensive when they're approached in the park, for example, and also, you know, some discussion around police procedure, and there's just a strong desire on both sides to have a closer personal relationship, which should take some of the stress away from the casual encounters that we might have while policing.
I mean, these young men are, and this was all young men, that particular meeting, they're like very receptive to this type of interaction. It's really heartening. And I'd love to push it on our level down to the rank and file as much as possible. It's just about like kind of beating this drum until we get some results. I mean, we had a few meetings where we held some during the day, and then we realized like that works for the clergy because it's their job to hang out with us, but regular community folks are actually working. Then we held them at night. There's a little bit of awkwardness, but I feel like although it's taken over a year, there is a thaw. We just need to keep up the momentum. And the other part of it too is there has to be like real engagement, just to hold. I can hold a bi-monthly meeting with the clergy, and it could be organically. Take care. It could be organically like comfortable and fruitful. But I think we need a little more structure. If we just say it's that time of the month for us to stare at each other across the table for 2 hours while we eat
But
pizza.
even the rights and responsibility stuff, especially with new Americans, I feel like that's something that people, I mean, I think we all know, but that can be a really good conversation to have.
Yeah, well, that's,
That was good.
any fodder for an agenda would be good. And so why don't we make sure we follow up on we'll go to hold another one of these, try to get some, even on a double day?
Yeah, there's a parents meeting this Friday night.
Okay, perfect,
Yeah.
yeah.
A couple others that were just directed more towards incidents in the community. Several officers responded to, this is from Aaron Noble. He said, thank you and your guys for assistance at Harbor Place. We appreciate the timely, appropriate response in providing extra hands, less lethal options, as well as negotiating capabilities. As our negotiators were tied up on the operation side of things, we appreciate your resources and expertise that you and your agency made available to us.
Is Harbor Place a shelter?
It's a transitional.
Right.
Yeah, this is the barricaded, huh?
Right, this was, you probably saw the underlying incident in the paper, where the male suspect wielding a machete at a Meals on Wheels driver and injured her. He was held up in the efficiency apartment there, and our officers responded and helped and used a lot of the de-escalation tactics and containment tactics in order to bring some control over the scene, and they were able to be an integral part in the peaceful resolve of that.
Yeah, I was really proud of our cops. I know Shelburne was doing what many agencies do, and you know, they not out of malice, just out of not having the training and resources we have. They were preparing to make entry into the unit to apprehend this guy who we knew was armed with a machete. And our officers, I mean, the way they tell the story is Mike Henry telling. We show up with rope and tie the door shut. They're like, you know, we're going to go in there. Why are you tying the door shut? He's like, no, we're going to make sure that the guy comes to the door and surrenders on our terms, not that we burst in or that he opens the door with a knife. And once they kind of saw that and saw it in action, I think it was really well received. And from their perspective, it was a new way of doing things. But from our perspective, it's like part of our evolution. So I was happy to hear that our cops, without me or Chief Burke or Chief Wright intervening, they just get a call for help and they go to another city or another town and then use our de-escalation and containment skills. I think that's it's good. And this guy, it's not a trivial thing. I mean, he'd hit someone with a machete. It's not like we're not, you know, this is a life-threatening situation. So, that was something to be proud of, for me anyway. That's all the correspondence.
There is one
Well-
other, Corporal Dollamura, I'm not sure if I'm saying.
Dollamura.
He responded to an accident, and this letter is recognizing his quick thinking to extricate the operator and render CPR while continuing to radio pertinent information. Dispatch responding officers in the fire department was a testament to his skill and experience as a BPD officer. He controlled a potentially chaotic accident scene and saved the life of the operator. Yeah, so those are ones. I've had several other that came in since I sent out that last, which we can, they keep coming, but we can go talk about those at the next meeting.
That's good to hear. So is that it for incoming correspondence? Those,
Yes.
it's really good to hear. So the next item is an update on the process involving officer complaints. And so what did we decide we were gonna do with that?
So, at the conclusion of the last meeting, as we discussed, we divided the complaints that we were sent previously by number of commissioners and sent out a packet to each commissioner. And I know today 2 of the commissioners met with Chief Wright, I believe, to go over there. So it's up to each individual commissioner to reach out to Chief Wright to go over the complaints. I don't know if you 2 want to speak about the process today that you individually had?
You went first.
Well, sure, I can. I met with Chief Wright, and I guess it was our first go at it, so we kind of looked at each other and said, how are we supposed to, you know, what's this process? But I think it worked well. I had, I think, 5 complaints that we went through, and you explained the event and how you handled it internally. And, I mean, certainly to me, they all seemed like they were appropriately handled, and you reached out to the complainant, and it seemed like I didn't have any problems with him.
And I went today, and I had a similar reaction. I was particularly impressed with the effort they put into cases where there's an allegation of excessive force. I don't know what the correct term is, but allegation of excessive force. They as I understand, they have an administrative process, and then it may bleed into an action, personnel action. But like in this one they had, I think it was 5 or 6 video views of it, and they had to go through each one of them. And I didn't know why at first, and they explained why. It seems to me that it's a really good process. And the other, there were 2 complaints that I thought were meritless, and I guess that was what they agreed as well. One person complained because a police officer wouldn't let him use the officer's phone to call his girlfriend, which seemed to me to be ridiculous. Excuse me. I just thought the process worked well. I appreciated the courtesy everybody gave me, and
I know, Chief Wright, you also showed some cases, by way of example, where we did very, very thorough investigations. Just to give some perspective that there, if it has merit, like, we take it pretty.
the one I saw there was, I thought sounded very thorough. Yeah.
Pretty deep dive.
Yeah, so we'll check in with Chief Wright after meeting with 7 of us could be oppressive in
Painful.
terms
You don't
of
have
getting
anything
your
else to do.
job done. So we'll check in
Chill
with
the
you. I
cops.
mean, this is just a pilot, and we'll see whether that has to be tweaked. So, I mean, we should have a goal that the remaining 5 check in with you by the next meeting.
I mean, I've certainly had some experience doing this a little bit already, you know, and I'd like to, I don't know, maybe I'll look at some of the complaints that I've sat down with a couple of different people, you know, and use that same process, and felt like, you know, even though it wasn't like some magical solution for the person, I think there was a lot of value in them being heard, and just, you know what I mean, and sometimes even understanding a little better about what happened, or, you know, but I like that. I really like, I'm glad that, I'd like to see us continue to do it and not just do it experimentally.
I mean, I think if there's, you know, if you just use the number 6 as a round number, it would be every other month. Right now, we're playing a little bit of catch-up just to get clear the backlog, but it would be a meeting every 8 weeks, right? For one person. So it would become less onerous going forward, and I think it would really help maintain transparency in this process. And, you know, I value, I mean, I've said, it's funny because I'm satisfied, or I'm becoming more satisfied, because when I first got here, one of the commitments I made to the commission was that we would be good and fair and thorough with our complaints, but I want to move beyond, we've got it handled, trust me. And I know it was, and I guess I had to gain, to some extent, the trust of the union, because they were used to the comfort of anonymity in the personnel process, the comfort of these records being shielded from outside eyes, which is the default in most personnel law in Vermont. And so for me to say, no, I really want to share these allegations and the proceedings with the commission, right away, I know when I first got here, they were hostile to that, and I don't mean that, I understand why. Because the Burlington Electric Department and the, you know, Board of Ed isn't airing its disciplinary matters publicly. It's just, nor the fire department. And, you know, we interact with the public a lot, and we have powers of arrest and force. I understand it is different, but at the end of the day, it's a human being who's the employee in all cases. So the fact that we can do this now, and that they're not like banging their fists on the table, and they were present during the meeting when we rolled these out, I think is a big sign of the fact that they trust the commission and the department, and that they think this will be fair. They've also been very fair when we found instances where I think things are sustained in terms of the discipline we've given out. So I'm glad that that's happening. And then one other thing that we'd explored, we had a meeting with the head of the CJC yesterday. There's a case that Chief Burke looked into, which is interesting, where an officer just on the face saw a motorist doing something that he thought was a traffic violation. He thought the motorist was driving through city property in order to avoid an intersection, and went and stopped her. The fact pattern, without giving away too much, the motorist felt like she was targeted for some sort of enforcement that was an indication of racial bias. And when you sat back from like Chief Burke's perspective or my perspective, you could see how both people came to their conclusions. The motorist, because she worked at the location, she wasn't cutting through, she thought she was just leaving work. And then the officer, because he catches a glimpse of like a completely out of place vehicle just driving through like a city lot, and coming out, and both of them being like, what? Like, how the heck? Mm-hmm. And so Chief Burke convened a meeting between the motorist / city employee and the officer who did the stop, and just them like airing their impressions out to the other one, and the motivations for their beliefs. And it was like it just completely, I think it made both of them understand the other's position, right?
Yeah, because that's, at the end of it, like, the officer, acted in a reasonable way, and the impression that the voters walked away with was equally as reasonable. And the officer was a very mature officer, and this situation was just right to bring the parties together
great.
and just talk about it.
Right.
And I think even when I think about my career in policing, like 20 years ago, we weren't talking about this. And there's a lot that we need to understand. And moments like that really are clear to understand. And I think it was a good way to have a conversation about police and race without stress in the room, and it was productive for both the officer and the affected city employee.
Yeah, and so we were thinking with the CJC that there are cases, if you see a case in your reviews, or we see one, where we're not contemplating discipline against the officer, but we feel that it is a misunderstanding or miscommunication, or a meeting where people, both the officer and the complainant, share their impressions, would help clear the air, give the officer better awareness of how actions can come off, even inadvertently. The complainant can understand why police make the decisions they do, and they're not always motivated by what they appear to be. And the CJC could be a good neutral ground for that. Because that's one of the, mediation and alternatives to discipline are what they specialize in. I think that would be helpful. Some officers, again, young cops might bristle at that. Cops who are defensive. To some extent, I'm like, I don't care. I want you to go through it. But I think that there are cases that are really right for this, and I think it would help maintain trust in the community.
And I've been doing that and calling it a facilitated complaint process and doing it at the CJC, sort of informally. I've been letting you guys know that I've been doing it, and a lot of times
Yeah.
you'll see the email or whatever. And actually, tomorrow night, as part of the Attorney General's Racial Disparities Panel, we have a subcommittee that's meeting to talk specifically about public complaints and how we might be able to handle that. And one of the recommendations that I hopefully will get some support in my committee to make this happen is something like that, like a facilitated complaint process that might even, God willing, like evolve into restorative, like using a restorative practice. And I know that that's probably off in the distance, but the facilitated complaint process and the way that I've been doing, and it sounds like some other people, is kind of like laying the groundwork for that. And of course, if we did do anything like that, the unions they would obviously have to be okay with it and all of that. But I think there's a lot of promise in that.
Yeah, and so it'd be interesting to see how that rolls out at the state level or higher up. But I think there's this opportunity. We want people, we want cops to go away feeling like they got a fair shake and they have the opportunity to tell their side of the story. But at least as importantly, if not more so, we want the people who complain to understand. And if it's a completely frivolous complaint or something, I'm not talking about that. But if somebody really just doesn't understand why they were treated the way they were, and like talking to the cop would help, I think this would be great. So.
Or sometimes they're really mad and they think something was really terrible. And the last one I did, young man, you know him, and he's got a lot of issues. He walked out. We still tried, and I think he really actually knows that there was nothing else that could be done. So it's not always perfect, but it's still worth it.
Anything else on that subject?
Smooth showing. Took over.
Any updates, commissioners' updates, anyone? So, you were going to talk about body-worn cameras.
I spoke to Chief Burke today, and apparently there's something in the works, and I think it's better to wait till it gets. Could you explain what it's going through the city attorney?
Sure, yeah, so we engaged a lot more of our staff. I think I mentioned that the last time we met about the actual mechanics of the operation of the camera, and made the intent of when to operate the camera much more clear. That final draft, from our perspective, was submitted to the city attorneys, and I'm just awaiting their review. Again, the edits aren't of such substance that I think there'll be a proper anticipate any issue, but part of the process is their review, and I hope to have it back here by next month.
And just to put in, I had made a proposal which I felt that the way that the regulations were written, that it made it very difficult for police officers to have to stop in the middle of a tough incident and decide whether or not I should turn off the camera. So I had made a proposal, which I understand has not been accepted, which is fine, but my idea was to have them allowed to continue to have it run and get either consent from the family, I'm thinking in terms of domestic, the next day, or if he wanted to consent to look at the video. The concern is the privacy of not necessarily the suspect, but of the family members. And so my proposal would have been to ask for consent the following day, keep the video with someone who would basically be the custodian of it, and if police officers needed it to prepare for trial, to review it, to prepare for trial, get a warrant, and the custodian serve it on custodian and be released. I understand what you're considering further down the road would be just let the police officers keep it running, because the Vermont law on the issue is pretty strange and probably isn't the law in the rest of the country. And so I think probably that approach makes sense. My main concern was to make sure the officers didn't have to, try to make sure the officers didn't have to make these decisions in the middle of something where I could just see a motion to suppress or some kind of suit or something coming from it, and just let them do it, and then give them protection by either getting a consent the next day to view the video, or you view the video by getting a warrant. And the warrant would be, in my opinion, would be relatively easy to get, because you've already written a probable cause affidavit for the case, and you could have a form. But in any event, I'm satisfied that my proposal was heard, and we'll move on.
Oh, yeah, and so the CJC presentation, I just wanted to give this to people. You know, I think there's like 22 CJCs around the state, and they're, you know, the work that they're doing is in relation to police departments, the courts, and corrections. So it's, you know, alternative justice that, there's just a lot of really good stuff going on. And so I guess that on the 27th, somebody's coming to present a little bit, and I just thought it was really important for us, you know, as commissioners to know about the work at the CJC. And so I wanted to bring this because if you do want to look at it ahead of time, each one of those little things are like the different programs, my programs
So
in
they're
there.
coming to this meeting?
Yes.
Oh, good.
And I think it'll just be like a 15-20 minute presentation or something, but mine is the offender workforce development thing. But there's a lot of really good stuff that's going on in the Burlington CJC and CJCs all over the state, so,
Good,
yeah.
thanks.
What's this? I'm not sure what this is, number 10.
Oh, that,
Oh, wait, go ahead.
someone suggested, I don't recall from the minutes, but, extending more of an invitation to encourage public participation in an upcoming police commission meeting. And it was just kind of casually noted, and that was the extent of it. So it was just on the agenda to bring that back up as something that the group wanted to consider.
Right, and so I mean, I know there might be more than one part to it, but I know you and I were talking about like, another public forum type of thing, like with Kaleo in February, because we really haven't done much of anything in the past couple of months, and, you know, people are interested in doing that again, so, we should talk about that, and I can figure, it would probably be like an early evening thing, so I know that's one thing that I know you and I have connected about, you know, so, I'm happy to work on that too, to try to make that happen. I don't know if there was more to that, but, I mean, a lot of times when people talk, they find out that I'm a commissioner, they're like, oh, you know, they say stuff about the police department or whatever, and I say, well, come to the commission meetings and talk, and nobody comes. So, I don't know, is there anything else on that topic?
Yeah, I just think quickly, once we have the data analyst in place, the chief's idea of having like
So we're in the background check phase of hiring an analyst, and she's committed as a new mom to, she gave birth, I think, in December, to starting hopefully full-time in March. It's still a month away, but like I said, assuming the background works out, and assuming she doesn't have an existential crisis, rightfully so, about maybe wanting to stay home with her kid, and then we go back to the drawing board, she would start in March, and I don't want to not extend an offer to a qualified local person because she's a mom. I mean, it's sometimes at night when I making a list of the analyses I need, I grumble, but it's a commitment that we've made and it's fair. So.
And what about the flexibility thing? I mean, can she ease into it, or?
Yeah, it's possible. We can contemplating, and we can't give her access to criminal justice data until the background's done.
Right.
But once that's done, she could start doing some part-time stuff in February, and I think that would be helpful. I mean, I think we have exciting news about I think car stops and outcomes. Believe me, I mean, I'm anxious to share it. We have all the 2016's data that we owe you. An explanation for that. We have a lot of good work done, and I think shows really positive trends. And I presume the back of the envelope is that 2017 is just as good. But I want to be able to have that conversation with you guys.
Would you like to come to one of the Attorney General panel things?
Where are they?
They've been in Waterbury at
No, I shouldn't say.
the Fox Complex. It's a really nice building.
Yeah.
If
You mean
you
to talk
want-
about this in particular? Yeah, well, yeah. Again, so in the coming months, I'd love to. Yeah, just when we have something to show.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Are you getting access to the court records now?
Oh, that's no.
Because I spoke to somebody at the court administrator's office who was very willing to work with you, and I also spoke to Jen at the state's attorney's office 2 or 3 months ago, and she says there's a way you can get access, so.
I think there's no problem, like, if you know a particular docket number, finding out what happens in a particular proceeding. Like, if I want to know what happened to the case of the state versus Robert Simpson. So maybe I'd be shocked but pleased to hear that there's a way to just download, like, charges, like, charge at arraignment, charge at trial, disposition, and then, sentence and whatnot. I mean, I would, if that's what they're saying, we're on it.
Well, the way that, and I can talk to you after, because I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
waste everybody's time, but from what I understand, talking to both of these women, that's quite doable the way, with the setup you have here.
All right, no, we're game. That's the missing link, and I think that the disparity work that the AG is interested in, from time of arrest to whatever the final disposition is, there's like missing pieces that would be helpful to know.
A lot of missing pieces.
No, right now, real quick, we track every arraignment that affects, I mentioned this I think we're in our second or third month. We sent someone was going to arraignments to figure out what was going on all along, but they were just taking kind of scratch notes, so we systematized it and automated it. And we're filling a database with all the arraignment outcomes of Burlington arrests. And we also send out a weekly summary of them all, so we'll be able soon to have hundreds of cases to start looking at all sorts of different outcomes by race, by charge, by judge.
Do you know of other police departments that are doing that?
In Vermont?
Anywhere?
Yeah, I think in, like, for example, Chicago or New York, they have all this data at their fingertips. I mean, I know
Police do or the courts do? Or they both?
They
do?
share it. It's
They
all,
share
yeah. There's like a criminal justice, like the New York City mayor's office has a criminal justice data coordinator that just looks at all of the data. I mean, I talk about New York because it's my comfort zone where I'm from, but I'm sure Chicago and LA and stuff, but nowhere else like Vermont, nowhere in Vermont is anyone doing this besides us.
I mean, and it's good to know because sometimes you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Just figure out how it's being done somewhere else.
No, listen, I mean, one of the things the University of Chicago took New York's arraignment data, God bless you, and concluded that the computers consistently do better than judges at setting bail. If bail is set to figure out whether somebody's going to do something, there's two things. And in Vermont, one reason that they set bail in New York is the worry that the criminal will commit another serious offense, another violent offense. In Vermont, you're not allowed to set bail for that reason. Am I wrong? Am I wrong about this? I want to make sure.
Yeah, you can, yeah, there are certainly circumstances where you can.
It's the secure appearance, that's what they said is the
No,
only,
That's one, but then when you have particularly
what's that?
serious offenses,
Yeah, very, very serious offenses.
well,
No, that's,
aggravated assault, aggravated domestic
aggravated assault, they never set bail for that. I'll show you the data.
The state's attorney can ask for it.
Yeah, I mean, and again, so it's interesting, that- so I
Maybe
stand
it's
corrected.
changed in 10 years, it's been
What's
10
that?
years, yeah.
Yeah, but the fact that they can do it doesn't mean they do.
Right, right, and so, you know, the question is, it becomes a real question of reoffense before appearance, like, is 1 out of 20 an acceptable price to pay for the liberty of the defendant, or is 1 out of 50, or is, because right now, it's very few people who get let out with no bail on aggravated assault or aggravated sexual assault reoffend before the next appearance. But it does happen, so what level of risk is acceptable for the victim community and versus the liberty of the defendant? And then we have folks who were arrested on burglary, they get let out, and while they're awaiting trial, we know that they're committing more burglaries. And burglaries are breaking into people's homes and ransacking their homes. So you have that is committing offense before, and then you have just not appearing. Those are the two reasons: to secure appearance and to prevent serious reoffense. And data shows that computers that are programmed with algorithms that estimate people's proclivity for violence, or that look at their prior appearance history to see if they make it to court, always do better than judges in New York at setting bail. So, but
You
you
track
know,
your
no
federal
one wants to
cases?
hear that.
Do you track your federal cases?
Yeah, we have very few federal cases, but it's a whole other level of seriousness.
But that for sure is easy.
Yes, there's few, and they're a hammer.
But the records are readily accessible.
Right, so it'd be interesting. I'm not saying that to say the judges make poor decisions. I mean, like, when any decision that you make again and again and again and again and again in the course of a day, like, they make different decisions in the afternoon than they make in the morning. They make different decisions at the end of a session than they do in the beginning. They make different decisions right after lunch than they do right before lunch. They're just human beings. So all I'm trying to say is we're going to have a body of data that will allow us to see, as a matter of research, how judges arraign, whether they do or don't set bail, whether they do or don't set conditions, and how defendants act as a result. It'll be really interesting. So,
Very worthwhile, too, I think.
yeah, it'll be interesting.
I mean, and I'm psyched that you're doing it, but it does kind of seem like there's some other parties that should be involved, or should be doing this and paying attention to
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
That's right.
I'll pass that on. So now the minutes from our last meeting, is everybody okay with them, or should we take a minute and?
I just have two things, and they're so picky. It just says Chair Shireen Hart on update on Commission's annual report. It should just say Vice Chair. And then, I'm only saying this because these are so meticulous that I figure you would want to know, so you don't have, it's, in the first line under Chief's report, it says expect, and I think it should say expect. I know these are really silly, but that's all I have.
Thank you. I got 'em.
Laura, you're fired.
No, they're great minutes. These are
Of course
really
they're
helpful.
great.
You did a great job. So that's why I feel silly, but they're so good that I know you might as well.
Yes, thank you. Perfect is better, or.
Yeah, and that's actually, that's not how you spell Dr. Marks's name. is it?
It's M-A-R-K.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a nod to Burlington's progressive roots.
Oh,
Gee.
another one.
Okay, so
Thank
where
you.
are we?
Where are you? Oh, I see.
So our next meeting,
You gotta do a motion.
oh, sorry,
That's okay. I'll move to accept the minutes as amended.
and I'll second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so our next meeting is on the 27th, right?
Yeah, it's school break. Is that an issue for folks?
I'm gonna be away the next meeting.
What's the date?
It's the 27th. Are you here, Peter?
Might be, I mean, I know that's my kids.
Maybe not, I may, actually, no, I may still.
That's my kids'
I think I am
winter
gone.
break. Yeah.
I'll be gone.
You'll be gone too? And you'll be gone? I would.
You might, yeah. Is that gonna be a problem with the CJC? Getting them to come on a different day?
No, they'll probably be okay with that. We could figure out. So are we talking about earlier in February?
Actually, I
'Cause-
could do the 27th, if it makes a difference. I don't
Well,
know,
so
28th.
maybe it's up to the chief. Chief, you're gonna be gone?
I was hoping to take some vacation then.
Well, I don't think this meeting is gonna be the reason that you don't.
No, I mean, it would just be the Adirondacks, right, so I would come back. But if we could do the 20th or I mean, you know, there's nothing. We could do the 6th, then, well, we don't wanna get it, we wanna have a February meeting in February, I guess, right?
Why don't we try the 20th, that's the weekend.
20th works.
Tuesdays before, it'll be one
Okay.
Tuesday earlier than normal.
Okay.
Does that work well for everybody? Thank you.
Sorry, what was
It
it?
does.
On the
20th.
20th instead?
February 20th.
And I'll just check with the people that are gonna be presenting and see if they can come.
Yeah, if you wanna
Yeah.
just, we were on the same email chain,
Yeah.
just keep, I'll do that tomorrow if I don't see it from you, but
Okay.
make sure that.
And if they don't, I mean, we could do it at another time, but we had a little kind of informal staff meeting this morning, and I was mentioning it, and people I think somebody was prepared to do it, and they're psyched to do it, so. So, are there any agenda items that we're gonna wanna have on, for that meeting?
I was gonna inquire just generally about the dog case and whether there was an update, and if not, this meeting, next meeting, just to see where that was.
Wasn't it sort of, kind of over and done with, or no?
I don't think it's over and done with. There's been,
I don't think so.
Last I remember, they came in and they asked for more time. There was some proposal for a certain amount of time, and the whole permitting, the thing they needed more time. And I mean, I'm just curious if there was.
yeah, I think we should just plan to put that on
Yeah.
for next
Yeah.
month, and we need to talk.
And also the dog trainer has reached out to me again, wondering when, what's going on and what kind of participation we might have.
And she was concerned, right, that she wasn't,
Well, both the dog owner and the dog trainer were concerned that some of the minutes of the meeting were not correct, or the conclusions of the meeting were not correct based on the testimony.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's something that the committee's gonna have to hash through.
Yeah, we should meet when Michelle's back in town.
Right, because I think Michelle kind of, I saw something that she kind of spoke to that to let her know, but yeah,
You know,
yeah, it sounds like maybe.
we were out of it.
Right, we did the
Right.
first round.
Okay. All right, we'll make sure it gets dealt with this month.
Do we need an executive session tonight? And you just joined us, hi.
Hi, yeah, this started at 6, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah,
uh-huh,
okay. I'm
Sorry.
just a student. I get
Oh, okay.
lessons.
oh, okay.
Okay.
They were wondering where you
Welcome.
were, the other students. The other students were wondering where you were.
There were a whole bunch of students here earlier.
Well, we're glad you're here, come again, it's definitely, so it's nice to see you. What school are you from?
University of Vermont.
Oh, good, welcome.
Next meeting.
We just.
We were just trying to figure that out.
20th.
Yeah,
20th.
It would have normally been on the 27th, but we're just scheduling stuff, and it looks like it's gonna be on the 20th. Are you, what do you study at UVM?
I'm environmental studies and political science.
Nice.
With more of a focus on political science.
Good. Okay, so, is that it? Are we done?
That's it.
Good. So we make a motion.
Oh, yeah, so I moved to adjourn.
All those in favor?
Favor?
So I will follow up with Mary and Michelle about the